T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Trap Talk Reptile Network, coolest reptile network in the world, episode 485. Ladies and gentlemen, I am tapped in, not in Cali. I am live from North Carolina. What is good? Welcome to another episode of the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Trap Talk with MJ live right here from North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, bringing you one of the most epic tree monitor episodes to ever hit Trap Talk Reptile Network. So you guys are in for a treat. First and foremost, I want to get right to it. I want to say tonight's episode is only possible by one guy and one guy only, my buddy Kenneth Jordan over at City Limit Exotics. Big up-and-comer in the ball python game, so do me a favor. Go follow City Limit Exotics on Instagram right now. Be ready for his Monday New Breed on the Block segment that's going down with me and Emilio Monday night, 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. But thank you so much, Kenneth, for this opportunity and being for tonight's sponsor, man. Again, City Limit Exotics in the building. Thank you so much. But yeah, man, I am excited. I'm been having the time of my life so far since being here in Asheville, North Carolina, with seriously one of the best doing it in the tree monitor game here in the United States. All right. So I just want to say shout out to anyone who's tuning in. Okay. Because you're in for a treat. You're in for a big treat. All right. We have someone who's also on the heavy end of the tree monitor game, tapping in with us from Canada. All right, Brandon Van Asten. So if there's any Canadians in the building tonight, be ready because you have one of Canada's, if not Canada's biggest tree monitor breeder, tapping in with me and Bryan Suson tonight. And I want to say shout out to anybody in the live chats. First and foremost, if you're in the live chats tonight, you got an important question or topic, do not be shy with dropping a super chat. Drop a super chat. We'll get that question or topic on the big screen. But without further ado, I'm not here to waste any more time. It is that game time opportunity for you guys to get your mind right and for you to stay hydrated because it's episode 485. Elite Tree Monitor Talk with Bryan Suson and Brandon Van Asten coming at you right now. Let's go. Cheers.
Good.
You ready for do more in the future? Trap Talk podcasts?
Yes.
Man.
Only Trap Talk. Exclusive.
Yes.
Exclusive. Oh.
So stop calling us.
Rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the crowd, God love it or not. I'm hot from the hop to the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with everybody, we do it. Everybody, we do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up, rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up, rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up, rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up.
And we're live, episode 485. Bryan Suson and the Joker from Canada, Brandon Van Asten. What's up? Hey, can you get over here now, Bryan? I don't care how camera shy you are. Dude, what's up with this guy? Like, Mr. I don't want to be on the camera. I'll just speak whenever you need to, like, dude, come on, please. There he is.
We got the girl, Ryan.
So
What's
handsome.
good? How you doing, Brandon? Thanks for being here tonight, buddy.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
How's your night going?
Good.
just got beat up a little bit injured, but other than that, okay.
Were you coming fresh from hockey or what?
No, jiu-jitsu, buddy.
Oh, you're in. Do you train jits? I had no clue.
Yeah. Check out the nose. I got a good rub right there.
Oh yeah, you did. Look at that shiner.
Yeah.
What belt are you, bud?
Oh, high up purple. No, I'm just white, my friend.
Wait, are you a purple or not?
Oh no, I'm just white.
Oh, I mean, hey man, you're in though. That's good.
Yeah.
This girl
just
too.
That's wrong.
Hey, Brandon. Hey, I got to tell you though, jiu-jitsu at our age is not easy on the body, is it? It's fucking hardcore, isn't it?
No, buddy. You get injured a lot. We don't bend like we used to. That's for sure.
Yeah, a little bit, man. But anyways, that's cool to see. And dude, Brandon, you have visited Bryan's. You're one of the, I guess, few fortunate people to actually see Bryan's place. I got to tell you, man, what an experience it's been so far. And I don't know, man. I have a good feeling about the tree monitor market because of what this guy's doing right now. I hear you're having a great year so far. So I think we're on the cusp, man, of these tree monitors blowing up. But I mean, let's hear from you, Brandon. What's your year been like so far, and how do you feel?
It's been good, man. I've had a really good year. I have eggs from all 6 species of tree monitors cooking in the incubator, so I can get that group shot, that mystical group shot of all of them together at some point, probably in the early fall. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, I mean, I was down at Bryan's before he had the new high-tech facility done. And I was impressed. So I would love to see it now. I'm going to have to drive back out there.
Well, I need you to let me know when you're coming back out here because I want to come back out here.
Yeah.
I told Bryan on the drive after literally getting out of the airport and just driving, I was like, Bryan, this fucking place is beautiful. Like just looking at it coming in, and he's like, buddy, you have no idea yet. And he was right, man. We went on a little hike today, which was fucking epic.
This guy lost it. We found some bears on the way down from a hike. There was a mom with like 3 cubs in the trees, and this dude about broke down, which is nice to see because it's a special thing if you haven't seen when there's any type of wildlife that you haven't seen in your life and you've always wanted to see it. So I got to witness that with MJ today with black bears, which was pretty nice.
Yeah, you had to lend him a new pair of underwear or what?
Pretty much.
I mean, dude, honestly, it was that kind of moment only because, Brandon, I told Bryan that I used to fly back east to Pennsylvania and visit family. And, I would see deer and turkey and they would talk about bears and I just would never see a fucking bear. And I can't tell you for how long I've been wanting to see a bear. Like just out in the wild. And I don't know if that just sounds like a simple fucking request, but to me, that was my whole life was to see what I saw this morning or this afternoon.
Oh, he was reeling for a good hour.
Fucking nuts.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, it's nice, especially to have the cubs.
The cubs, I think those cubs is what really made it because he told me stories about stuff that happens here on his property. And I'm like, okay, seeing bears is one thing, but to see like a family, like a whole, like all of them following the mom, and that's exactly what happened. It was awesome to see them just kind of, oh fun. Shit, mom's leaving. We got to go with her now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see a mom with cubs for sure. You just don't want to scare her.
Yeah,
no, I mean, but she wasn't really scared, was she?
She didn't really care, but we were in the car. I mean, if we'd have got out, I'm sure she'd have been.
Yeah, that'd be a different story. Maybe.
So listen, guys, I've had both of you guys on this show before. We've gone back and forth on information as far as tree monitors and whatnot. But let's be real, man. I mean, you guys are on the forefront of the expansion of the entire tree monitor game as far as new people coming in. And I know that that's not always the easy task, because guess what? If new people are coming in, there's gonna be a lot of people who are asking questions, a lot of people who are, going to think they know what they're doing, but they end up not knowing what they're doing, and they're going to come back to you. So I thought we could just cover just really like the basic keeping needs as far keeping tree monitors go, just because I know, like I said, I from what I could predict and from what I can see, tree monitors are only going to get bigger and bigger, my guys. And I don't know if you guys feel the same, but.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think so. I mean, they're pretty much everything you want in a pet reptile in general, right? They're intelligent, they're beautiful, they're active, they're entertaining, and so they're kind of and they're not, massively large, so they're totally manageable, enclosure wise and everything. You can do up some crazy, crazy enclosures, heavily planted, whatever you want to do. So they kind of have it all. There's something that I don't think you would get bored of, whereas other things maybe you would in time.
Right.
That's what MJ was saying today. I think you hit it on the head, Brandon, as far as like the size. He's like, you need to get some lace monitors. I'm like, I don't need to get some lace monitors. And I've had multiple people say that, like good friends, and I think even you and I have talked about larger monitors, and we're just like, man, the beauty of these tree monitors, and they still will take up some space, but not like a lace or a big water monitor. They really fill that niche.
And for what you guys do temperature wise, I mean, a lace would just change everything. And since we're on that topic, you yourself, Brandon, went from keeping Aussie species as a foundation to transferring over to tree monitors, and that was even an adjustment for you, from what I remember, right?
Yeah, well, because they're both in the same facility, and the Aussie stuff, I had to kind of do a workaround with like increasing wattage and stuff to keep them hotter than other species that I was working with. So yeah, it actually worked out. It's working out better for me. Before, when I was really keeping the Aussie stuff cranked in temperature, I was getting lots of eggs, but they were in like close succession. And, I'd get a clutch of eggs every, month or something from a pill bar, even like every 3 weeks. It was crazy. Same with Kimberly's, but, now that the new situation's going on in my shop, they're still laying the same number of clutches. It's just spaced out a bit more throughout the year. And it's probably better for the females that way anyways.
How does your production compare as far as like Aussie stuff to tree monitors? Is it pretty balanced, or are you still heavily more into the Aussie? Like how would you compare that percentage wise?
I'm gonna admit the Aussie stuff I've had dialed in for so long. It's like almost like everything's set up for them, so I don't really have to do a lot and worry about them. All my focus has been on the tree monitors, right? And because the Aussie stuff that I want, I've had for a long time now. The tree monitors, it's always new because I just hatched Cordensis for the first time not too long ago, and they're all new and fresh. So all my focus has been learning them because they are something new to learn, right? So over the last few years, and even over the last few years, I mean, I've been breeding blue trees for a long time, and some of the other species, but like even over the last couple of years, been a huge learning curve with them, right? Just getting little things dialed in. So
have you now that you've got all those species firing, Brandon, do you have a new favorite? Or are you still I think the last time we talked, your favorite was greens?
Greens? No, I don't know, man. That's it's so hard. So hard.
It really isn't it really though, because it's like I guess you could pick a favorite, but I don't get bored of any of them. Like they're all fucking amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're all cool in their own way. It's like it's one of those things where your maybe favorite or focal point is the stuff that is newer to you, right? So things like the Cordensis, let's say bulgy eye. It's like, oh, those ones are like, okay, you're always wondering what they're doing, and everything gets put on the back burner while you're focused on those guys, right? Because everything else is going pretty well. So it's like, this is my new favorite at this time, right? But like I said, when all the dust cleared and everything was on an even playing field, I don't know. I don't know. They're all, I don't know. It's so hard to say.
Or you just being careful because you have one species more than the other you're trying to sell. Is that what it is?
Oh, well, no, not at all. They all, you know what? I don't think we produce enough to have to worry about selling them all. But if all the dust settled, I'd have to say probably like my favorite out of the tree monitors would be the blues, just because I've had them for so long. They're the ones that got me hooked, and they're still beautiful, right? It's just, they're becoming more and more commonly produced now. So those things, right? When the appearance of them is not as rare, let's say, or whatever, then people start to look at other species. But I still think the blues are, probably the most eye-catching, just because blue is such a rare color in nature. But
Brandon, let's nip one thing in the bud right now. Okay, there's a lot of talk from what I've heard about certain species being more violent than the others, like blue's more aggressive or this and that. What's your guys' both take as far as one species being more aggressive than the other?
Bryan, what do you think?
Are you saying so you're saying aggression?
Like blue, I heard blues are more likely to fuck you up than any other species out there.
Oh, towards you.
Yeah, I disagree with that big time. I was telling MJ today that my nicest animal that is the most chill that I would take out and put in someone's hand, and then my meanest animal are both blacks. And I really think that you can get an example with any species of a really nice calm animal and a very, kind of more psycho. You're going to get more psychos out of wild caught stuff. But I mean, from talking with Brandon, because he obviously, I haven't bred the blacks, but with his experience from blacks, I mean, he says that they're just super, super chill and gentle, which my really chill one is a captive bred animal that came from Bryan Spot Life, the siblings to yours.
Yep.
And it's the most chill animal I have. But again, the animal that has logged the most bites on me is a different black tree. So it's like, where do you go? But yeah, I think it's kind of like a toss up. Every animal has its own personality, but I would definitely not say blues are most likely to jack you up.
Yeah, what you got to say on it, Brandon?
Yeah, I have the same. They're all the same across the board. Like I don't think. I'm trying to think. Like I've never put myself in a position to be bitten by an adult tree monitor. Really, I mean, once or twice maybe, but yeah, in terms of personality, they're all pretty good. They're so individual too, right? But you have some that are great and some that are a little shyer or whatever. But it seems like all the blacks adults that I have, and they're all wild caught with the exception of one now, or we were originally wild caught when I got them. They're all great. They come right out on you for food, and I'm not one to go in there and handle them all the time and do that sort of thing. But when I do, they recognize me, they come out. So whereas some of the other ones, they're a little bit tentative or whatever. But yeah, it's just individual. I don't think there's a tendency for one over the other. I would have said that blacks were more aggressive towards cage mates, like females when you reintroduce a male after egg laying and stuff. I would have said that because recently I've noticed a lot of nest guarding stuff, but now it seems to be kind of uniform across the board with all the colors, where the female will lay eggs and you dig the eggs up and you put them in the incubator, and then it's like, okay, when do I put this male and when is that testy period over for the female, right? It seems like before I had no problem putting the male back in, but now it seems like there's a lot of nest guarding stuff with yellows, blacks, greens, and everything. So, which in my opinion, I think that's probably a more natural kind of response to get out of my territory. My eggs are down there sort of thing. Right. So I don't think that's a bad thing. That's the only aggression I see between tree monitors and me and tree monitors and one another is that nest guarding. Other than that, like two males together, even, I mean, there's probably some behavioral cues and things that only they understand, but they don't sit there and rip each other apart. Right. So yeah, that's what I'd say. I mean, they're all, in my opinion, they're all pretty easy to work with that way.
I think it's important to keep in mind too, from what you said, you think about from the time when an animal's actually mating, whether it be in our care in an enclosure or out in the wild, they're doing that event. And then, these animals are separating, from what I presume. I guess I haven't studied tree monitors in the wild, so I couldn't say 100% with certainty that, there's not a pair bond but from what I know with most other monitor species, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, if you know any different, but it makes sense that a female would want to run off another animal, whether it be a different tree monitor or the male that she mated with, because yeah, that's a threat to her clutch. So it's just a natural, you'd think a good mother would do that for protecting the eggs, especially if she's within that period of laying,
Yeah, for sure. That would be her natural response. I'm sure, like, especially knowing that tree monitors probably eat a lot of eggs in the wild, right? That's probably high up on you. Yeah. So she probably innately knows to like hover around the nest area for a while until it's better concealed and, you know, weathered, let's say, and then maybe takes off. But I don't have any firsthand experience with wild tree monitors or monitors in general. So my observations are totally in the lab. Let's put it that way. So
likewise.
Now, what's the reality of your guys' customers coming to you, buying their first tree monitor, but then asking you like breeding advice? Like, is that seems to be like most of your guys' customers that are buying tree monitors to get into breeding, or do you feel like, you know, it's also a lot of it just people who just want to keep them for the well-being of it being a cool tree monitor?
I mean, I have, I guess some of mine now have been bred. Like I know Matt Kosman produced some a clutch with my yellows, but you know, he has some experience with those. But I haven't had, most of my customers kind of haven't gotten to that point of breeding yet of their own.
But they're trying. But
they want to, and they're like interested in getting the opposite, you know, gendered animal just to pair up. But yeah, I you know, I haven't really had many folks reaching out yet for that information in that stage. Brandon?
Yeah, I think it's the same. It's kind of the same. They're almost so new, right? In kind of their availability that, you know, they take, let's say, 3 years to mature. So we're probably approaching that where people want lots more breeding advice from the animals they purchase from you. There's been a couple people up here. Shout out to Alex and Ivan. They've produced some blues, but they're pretty knowledgeable keepers to begin with. So they had a decent background. Anyways, they didn't really need to pick my brain too much. In fact, the Alex that I mentioned, he was the first one in Canada to breed black trees, and I actually picked his brain a bit. I'm like, what did you do back then? And he, you know, and he was you know, he helped me out, kind of solving some of the things that I was seeing. So that was good that way, right? I picked his brain. So yeah, but yeah, not so much breeding stuff yet. It's mostly, I find, people, you know, they'll buy a hatchling tree monitor, and I think the expectation with like baby tree monitors is that they're like ravenous predators and they'll feed 24/7, and every bit of food you offer it, you expect to see them eat it, right? And they're very like they won't eat like a, you know, a baby Savannah. I don't know. This is my experience. A baby Savannah monitor, let's say, or something, right? They're not gluttons in that way. So that's the big thing that I get. It's like lots of people say to me, "Oh, my baby tree monitor is not eating," and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's pump the brakes a little bit, right? Don't expect that they'll eat a lot. I mean, they're tiny little things. They like to, you know, eat reasonably sized prey. So, you know, a baby tree monitor might be able to eat 2 or 3 adult crickets in a sitting. That's it, right? And then it'll be fine. Go and bask for the rest of the day." So those are the questions that I encounter the most now, things like that. So I always try to explain to people like positions of food dishes and things like that in the enclosure that might stimulate them to you know, eat more, right? Like one of the big things I tell people is if they have a baby tree monitor and they're worried about it eating, you know, and there's a basking perch, you know, maybe screw a little dish near the basking perch right close to the light. That way, when it's warmed up, the food's right in front of its face. You might actually see it eat once in a while. And, you know, and then you can notice the food being gone. And as long as it's pooping and not losing weight and all that sort of stuff, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But they're not going to, like, as soon as you get that baby tree monitor, they're not going to fly out on your arm and grab everything off tongs, right? So,
I was saying those Spotty's blacks were. I mean, Spotty, the black tree monitors I got from Bryan, they right out of the bag. They were like crawling on me, ready. They ate instantly, which was kind of like a surprise.
Yeah, how old were they when you got them though? I was just about to say
yearlings. They're already over a year. I think they were just shy of a year, maybe, or be coming up on a year, but they definitely weren't fresh hatchlings. They weren't fresh at all.
If it's a yearling, that's more understandable. Just like they're, you know, they're well started, they're used to you, they recognize. Whereas like a fresh baby, you know, granted, I'm holding on to my animals anywhere from you know, a month to sometimes 2 months before I'll release them. And I think, yeah, that's an important part as far as just making sure the animal's comfortable. For me, it's like I always tell people, and I try to get this dialed in before they get an animal, is, you know, the hides. If you give, you know, you'll get people who have these big cork tubes that are like this for a baby's body diameter that's only like this. And I always tell people, like, you want to try and match the diameter of your cork tube hides as close to that body size, because they like to get in where they can puff up a little bit and you can't get them out. And that's what they want. So like the more you give them that comfort, you know, that's also going to lead to an animal that's more comfortable feeding and kind of being out in front of you. So,
yeah. So, like you said, if it's a yearling animal that's been in your care, I mean, those things will run out on you and feed up dogs. But like Bryan said, we're usually selling them at, you know, over a month to 3 months age, in that window, depending on the animal and how strong it seems. And, you know, the expectation with that thing, I mean, there's some, if you look at Cody Kopp, I mean, he, you know, his will run out on his hands, and I'm like, well, I want to get some of that bloodline because, you know, maybe that's a genetic thing, but you know, that's not the norm, right? So, at least in my experience. So it's just, you know, I think him
and Parker have some fucking crazy type patients, because based off what I've seen, they stick their fucking arm in there for like an hour and a half, and they'll stay there until the tree monitors have the balls to go on their arm. And the thing is, I don't have that kind of time. Like I can't sit there, and I have ADD too. So it's like,
they put in, I mean, I saw Parker's animals were very tame seeming
right off the bat.
And, but I know Cody puts in a lot of time with his, you know, to get them that way, it seems like. But saying, you know, people who want super tame animals, they can hire Cody to come to their place and sit there with them for hours on end.
Just put a man.
I heard Cody's gonna start charging a premium for like a well-trained tree monitor, is what I heard.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Just put a mannequin arm in there. Mimic.
All right, listen. One of the misleading things I feel like a lot of new tree monitor keepers, not intentionally, but you know, and this also goes to other reptiles kept in the hobby. You know, you have people who just really rally behind bigger caging, the better, right? Like, give them the most space they could possibly give because that's what they deserve and that's what they need. But can we really fucking dissect this a little bit, okay? Because the most common first tree monitor keeper, how the fuck is he going to get anything dialed in and anything too big, first and foremost, right? I just want to know what your guys' take is as far as a new tree monitor keeper, like putting something that shouldn't be in something as big as it needs to be. I want to talk about cage sizing all around with you guys and see what you guys think about bigger is better and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I think we touched on, I mean, I know we had talked about this at one point. It's like for babies, definitely not. I mean, keep them in something where, again, that baby can find the prey item. Your food is going to be easily findable. You're able to keep track of them. When they get older and you've got an established animal that you've had in your care that's an adult, yeah, I think we said, like, you know, if you want to give them a bedroom size cage, go for it. You just have to make sure that the requirements are met. So that's going to require probably, if you're going with a super tall cage, you're probably going to need some floor heating also to radiate up. Otherwise, your floor is going to be really cold. I prefer a wider cage over a tall cage. Just, you know, I'd take a 4 foot tall by 6 foot wide than a 6 foot tall by 4 foot wide, just because I was telling, you know, MJ today when he was looking through the collection and he asked me about caging, he's like, well, wait, so what about like the vertical? And I showed him, we literally walked through. I'm like, look at every one of these tree monitors. Yeah. How are they oriented? They're laying on their branches horizontally. You don't see any of them hugging the branch vertically like, you know, you would some other lizard species. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So I like that width. I mean, I would say, you know, again, you can go as big as you want, but you got to meet the standards with lighting, probably multiple basking spots, multiple UV spots, and a lot more energy to heat a bigger cage. So it's trickier to do, but that's what I got to say about it.
Yeah, I think we've said that before. I'm on the same page, man. I think the horizontal space, you know, is much more important than the vertical space within reason, right? Like the 6 foot, 7 foot long. Like if I were to do it again and build all my cages again, and let's say I had more room to do what I wanted to do, because obviously, you know, it's a breeding facility, so you have to consider efficiency in that for me. But, you know, longer would be much better. I mean, we've said this for years. I mean, how often do you see a tree monitor on the floor of the enclosure? I mean, unless it's trying to escape extreme amounts of heat or something, right? But you don't see it. So if they could get the horizontal room to run around on branches and that sort of thing, it's way better than having a 8-foot tall enclosure, you know, in my opinion. So, and then for
go ahead, Brandon.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say.
No.
No, Brandon. Yes. Hatchlings, you start them out in something small. And by small, like, I mean, I start all my hatchlings individually in a 3-foot by 18-inch tall. So it's not very tall, by 21-inch deep enclosure. Every single one is individually, which is proving to be problematic now because I'm running out of enclosures for baby monitors. But, yeah, you know, so, and then from there, if it's one that I haven't sold and I'm holding it back, then I'll move it to a 4-foot long by 2-foot tall by 24 inches for, you know, a while. And then I'll move it into the adult enclosures. Right. And with the adult enclosures, like you said, if you want to go, you can go as big as you want. I don't think, you know, that's been a bit of a criticism, I guess, is like, oh, he only uses this size enclosure, right? But, you know, I've never said it doesn't work if you go bigger, right? You can go bigger if you want. I have to consider efficiency in my situation, but what I do works for me. But yeah, bigger is always better. If you have the room, go nuts, man, right? Do it.
But also be prepared to, you know, have to dial some shit in too, right? Like that's, especially for like the new avid tree monitor keeper, like Bryan says, you got to make sure that floor is right. You got to make sure there's everything that tree monitor needs for that big, huge enclosure to work out.
Well, you know what I find too? It depends on the person as well, right? If you're somebody who is going to be overly worried about your monitor all the time, your baby tree monitor, then put it in a smaller enclosure, like the 3-foot one that I use, because if you're going to be ripping it apart every day to find it, that's going to be worse than, you know, like in many respects, if you have a big enclosure than if you were to keep it small and you could see it, you know what I mean? So it depends on your mindset going into it, right? And I know I've sold lots of monitors to people who are like, oh, I can't find it, I can't see it. And they're always ripping bark off the wall trying to find where they are hiding. And, you know, that's not good either. So, you know, if you're going to lose a baby tree monitor, if you build it off the hop, a 6-foot tall by 5-foot wide by 4-foot deep enclosure, right? You're going to be stressed all the time. Is it still in there, right? So that's part of it as well. So
I think there's also a fine line. Not only like I use the same cage size. It's either 18 tall or 24 tall by 3 wide. And it's the same, like you want to make sure you're not putting too much stuff, too much decor in there. Like branches, I think you can kind of go wild with, but too many hides. And I know Brandon, we talked about this, but it's like, if you have too many hides, you might not ever see that brand new baby that you just got that's very nervous and not used to being around you yet. So it's almost like you want to go simpler with your setup when you start. And then after the animal's kind of acclimated, you know, if you want to get a little fancier with it, you can. But
fancy comes with a price sometimes. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you got to limit almost. You want to put your hides in strategically good places where the animal is going to be comfortable, properly sized hides, and not necessarily tons of big things everywhere because they're not going to utilize it all, or you may never see it.
So people are right now listening to the sizes and thinking you're talking a glass Exoterra tank. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we use PVC. I know, like, or Brandon, I know you're using wood, correct? Or like the
build all my own.
Yeah. So we're using something that's opaque. And I know, like with Brandon's system, it works really well for his humidity and keeping his enclosure how he needs it for his animals. I'm using PVC. I know a lot of folks recommend PVC. The problem with glass is that most of them are screen top, so you lose a lot of humidity. So it's best to have something that has a solid top, whether it be like something that you make yourself or a PVC. But glass is not really the best. I would steer away from Exoterras unless it's like a short term. I have used Exoterras for a very short term when I was tight on some caging early on. But your animals will do better in some sort of an opaque wall and cork your walls.
Because they utilize it. They climb all that shit.
Yeah.
And
You're gaining cage space. Like
Right.
you're gaining cage space in your cage by making the walls climbable. So, you know, you got to look at that as like usable space.
And fuck lattice board. Just want to say.
Yeah, I don't like lattice board. Well, yeah, that sort of stuff. I don't really like it. I just don't like it probably because it looks too manufactured. Like I like the nice cork tiles that I use, and they look more natural. And but yeah, the like when with my setups for babies, man, I have a simple setup for every cage. I do the same thing in every cage. I basically put a slab of bark along the back wall just from a tree from my woods, a dead tree. I'll go and get a thick piece of bark that's got lots of nooks and crannies, and I'll just layer 2 of them like back to, or, you know, front to front, or just spooning each other, so to speak, the pieces of bark, lean those up on the back wall, and then I'll just crisscross a whole bunch of other pieces of bark under the basking spot, and then have a couple pieces of sticks going up the other side, so they can wedge in between the 2 pieces of bark along the back wall. They can run out and bask on the mishmash of sticks I have under the basking spot. And that's it. I keep it really simple, and they feel comfortable in between those sandwiched, you know, slabs of bark. And then if I wanted to find it or check it out, I just peel one of the pieces of bark off, like just pull it out, and there it is, right? I'm not ripping everything apart and whatever. So it's really, really simple what I do.
That's a key word right there, is simple. Simple is best for babies. You know, you want to get wild and plant up an enclosure with tons of stuff, wait till it gets older. But for a baby, give it its necessities, and that's it. And make sure it's established, and then go from there.
Yeah.
So my very first huge investment as far as any monitor goes was the lace monitors. And that story you just talked about, Brandon, how like people are freaking out looking for their fucking lizard. I probably did that for the first month with the lace monitors, only because, like,
You know way.
Fuck you. What a dick. No, but seriously, like it like if I had those in I think it was 3 foot tall. It was nothing crazy big, but even then, the amount of like rocks and stuff that I had in there, man, I stressed out every day thinking those things got, only because I thought, like, I think something bad might happen with these lace monitors, because it's like it's expensive fucking animal. And when you drop that much money, like your mind is racing. You know what I mean?
And it comes from a good place. Like all the keepers that I sell to, like they all want to do something really nice for their animal. They want it to be aesthetically pleasing when they look at it. So it's a tough pill for a new, especially if it's your first tree monitor. You've got all these grand plans of what you're going to set up the cage like, and it's just, you just got to understand that the baby is not the one to do that with. Pace it, and in time you can get wild, but you know, it comes from a good place in people's hearts. They want to give that animal like tons of stuff, and they put tons of fake plants in there. I'm like, I always tell them, like, okay, all those fake plants, like, get them out, take them out, and then like put this, make sure you have this, and let's start there. And if that goes well, then you can start adding your fake plants in and go from there.
Right. Yeah, they're, like you said, it does come from a good place. They're super genuine. They want to do really well by the lizard, but and you know, it's they read a lot too, and they see all these wicked bioactive things, and they get the idea. And eventually, you can work up to that, but it's not really necessary, or you know, necessary. Let's say for a house, especially one that you want to fresh again.
And also too, like this is the job of, like, you know, there's lots of questions about, you know, animals and how you keep them. Like that's also part of why, you know, when you buy an animal from someone, that's the job of that person that you purchase that animal from. Like they should have that knowledge and provide you with the proper husbandry to take care of that animal. That's part of the reason why I purchased, like, especially starting out from someone. And that's why, like, you know, you want to support folks who are doing captive breeding, like ourselves. And, you know, because you're not just buying the animal, but you're also like buying knowledge, and you're buying information that comes along with that. And that's very important.
No, for sure.
Now let me ask you guys a question, because how far you guys are so far with the tree monitors. When someone comes and asks you a question about a tree monitor, they're not a customer, but they're asking questions. How do you guys take that?
I answer it. I mean, you know, if they haven't been a previous customer, it depends on what they're asking to and the depth of the question. But it's like
how to breed.
You know, it depends.
Just got these imports, hell of a deal.
Yeah.
One of them's missing a leg, but how do I breed them?
But you laugh, but I've had people that I've never met before. They never bought anything from me. Want a laundry list of, you know, how to raise a hatchling all the way to how to incubate and hatch eggs. And I'm just like, I don't. First of all, that's a book's worth of material. And second of all, I have no idea who you are, right? So, I mean, if it's a basic question or whatever, I'll answer it for them. I'll try and help them out because, you know, that might be a future customer, right? They may pair up their animal or whatever. And I'm, you know, I generally don't mind talking to people. So I'll answer it. It depends on the question they're asking, you know. So that's basically it. But I'll generally answer someone's question, even if they're not a customer. Right? Like if they haven't purchased something from me. I get that a lot. Bryan, I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, I get it for sure.
Oh, does he?
Answer, Bryan?
What's that?
Yeah, do you answer them?
Yeah, again, it depends. And I mean, what I just said before this question, that kind of almost answers part of it. Like I do, you know, I'm definitely more partial to my customers because, I mean, again, I believe that you should be support, you know, like I want to back up my customers, whoever buys an animal, like you're getting that information. Again, that's part of the purchase. So yes, like with basic questions, I'll answer basic questions. But when it gets, if you want to, you know, you just got animals from someone else and same thing that I have available, it's like, you know, it's a tougher pill to swallow, but with basic questions, sure. But like, if you're coming to me and you're like, hey, can I get, you know, breeding advice on this? I just got these. So it's like you got, and it's not like I'm not, you know, you can't look at us as being a mean person or someone who's like disrespectful. You got to look at it like also like, this is a business. This is my livelihood as well. And so like, you know, you're wanting my information on certain things to be able to compete with me, and you're getting it at a free price and not even buying in. And then there's MJ has been telling me all these, like, I should be a, you know, Patreon, and how he does Patreon, and like how for certain members, they get information like that. So, but yeah, generally if it's basic questions, like I want people's animals to do well for them. They've already got them. I don't want to see people fail with that. But if you're coming to me for like specific breeding advice and you're not a customer, you're probably not going to get it from me. But if it's, you know, a simple, you know, care thing that's going to help your animal do well, I want to help with that, you know?
Yeah. Colonel Sanders doesn't give up his chicken spice recipe, right? Or his fried chicken recipe.
But also he got outdone though. Let's be real. I mean, Popeye's a lot better than KFC. I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
KFC is crack.
True. But you know, that's another thing, right? Like I do feel like everything that we're doing, right? Like Reptiles, as far as the success behind it, is a livelihood. Like it provides the success that you guys have in the reptile game allows you to move forward and keep it going, right?
And it takes a lot of money to get invested into this.
Well, the time though, like time you can't get back. Like we're, you know,
time,
money's
like
one thing, right? But
sure,
the time, bro.
But the amount of investment and time and money that we put into any breeder that puts into like being successful with it, you know, to come at them and want that for free without anything after like being in the hole in a project, like you know, Bomai, I've made $0. You know, on any of it. You know, it's like both Brandon and I are in the same game. Like we've got
you dropped a lot of money on that project.
Oh yeah,
and
made nothing. No, but it's but you know, so it's like it takes a lot to get into some of these, and we have our failures and trials and tribulations with that. So it's like, I mean, I think there are people who come and like, hey, you know, I want some information, and I'm willing to like, you know, compensate you for some of that information as well. And that's a more like can be a respectable way to go about it too.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. I mean, that's it. Right. I mean, the time aspect of that you've put into it. I mean, it's a passion. So it's, you know, it's a reward just in of itself. So I don't try to monetize the time that I put into it, but like definitely the financial investment that you put into it, right? Like Bomei project and stuff, or, you know, to get some of these rare things, especially in Canada, it's cost a fortune to get them. And then to build all the enclosures and to build the facility that I built. I mean, that's not cheap, right? So that's one thing that you have to consider, especially like if, you know, you don't really have people balking at prices really. So, so I think with wild caughts coming in fewer and far between now too, and the prices of them, they're pretty comparable, to be honest. So you don't get many people complaining about the price of them, but like understand that the price of them is, you know, it's trying to recoup some investment, because we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in these projects by the time you look at everything. And then your monthly costs of hydro and feed, like, it's not cheap to do.
Tree monitors are not cheap to keep.
No.
I mean, they're very, very expensive animals to keep compared to a gecko or a python.
Oh, yeah.
And they take up space.
Tons of space, tons of energy, you know, electricity, and a lot of food. And that's like, you know, versus like if you're going and buying a cheap animal from an importer and, you know, they got this animal, flipped it, they're not really offering you any care advice other than basic stuff. They have no breeding care info to give you. There's a value in supporting your, you know, whoever it may be who's breeding them in captivity, someone who's captive breeding. Like, those are the people you really want to support. And like Brandon said, the prices are not too far off. And you're, you know, by the time, we've also harped on this, by the time you're done treating that animal and stressing it out and paying for the vet bills, medication, and it might not make it on you also. Like, there's a lot of things to consider. You know, if it's a difference of 500 or even a K, if that's going to stop you from getting captive bred, it's like, you might want to rethink it and, you know, support someone who's put in the work and time, who can offer you that resource of expertise. You know, it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, it is a different ball game to try and get like an imported animal to breed and do well. And I mean, I have lots of experience, and I've tried to get recent imports and stuff for like diversity. And it's like, it takes a long time to get those animals up to snuff and breeding. And, you know, I consider myself to know what I'm doing to some degree, right? So imagine somebody who's fresh into the game choosing a wild caught animal over a captive bred baby. I mean, it's almost, I look at it as being almost hopeless in many respects in terms of, you know, a sustainable breeding project, right? Like, I have 25 years of monitor breeding experience, and I still see some of these imports. I'm like, geez, you know, I don't know if that's going to be viable at all, right? So, and it is a process to get them going. I mean, people buy imports and they don't understand what they're in for with feeding, right? Like some of the recent imports that I've got, let's even say like Bomei, right? You know, you can't just go and jam food into them. And if they're not eating, I mean, it's a slow process. You might have to feed them like, you know, I've experienced having to feed like one hornworm to a Bomei for every couple days to get it feeding, right? And if I didn't have restraint and I didn't know what was going on in the situation, you know, I might try and like even panic and force feed the thing or whatever. I've seen people do all sorts of crazy things, right? And I know that I just offer a little bit, because if I don't, that thing will regurge, and then it's taken 10 steps back from where it is currently. And there's like it can be a nightmare, right? So,
and regurging, that sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Dude,
I mean,
some of those imports, they're so stressed, so dehydrated. If you try and feed them too big a meal, I've had it happen to me. This is how I developed this technique of like, you know, just really feeding them tiny bits every couple days, and it takes months to get them up to, you know, okay, now we're in the clear, right? And that's before any treatment, really. Like, I don't get them in and start treating them, because that could be a death sentence for them. But like, I get them, just leave them alone, and just put, you know, like I said, like a hornworm in there. Some will eat lots, but like, you know, a lot of times you get these scrawny imports or whatever, and you really have to work with them. Do you like it? You know, I mean, I've had some imported animals that came in good condition when I started breeding tree monitors years ago. And, you know, I was able to get like my greens breeding in 6 to 8 months, I'd say, right, from acquiring them. But like the Bomei that I have, I mean, I just got my first clutch of eggs, and I've had those things for like a year and a half or whatever. So, or they've been in captivity for a year and a half. So, right.
That's the other thing too that people don't understand. They may think like, well, I'm going to get this import female. She's already ready to breed. It's like by the time she's ready, it may be a year from now that she's in a position with body condition and health wise that she's even possibly ready to go. Because you're not just going to get her and throw, you know, like it takes time.
Yeah, and then even her cycle, if she's an adult, right? You've totally thrown off her cycle with the stress of that whole situation and the stress of captivity now. And she takes a long time to get her bearings, right? So, you know, it's, and that's if you somewhat have experience and know what you're doing to get them to that point, right? Most of them probably never get to that point, I would say.
Right.
Here's the thing, guys, about knowing what you're doing. For me personally, I always think I know what I'm doing, but I actually don't. And that's only because I listen to information almost too closely. And you think when you hear something that works for somebody, you think it's automatically going to work for you. And I want to say one of the most misleading things as far as that could really cause a disaster for any fucking tree monitor, I guess, at this point, and I want to hear clarification, is having like a solid dubia fucking diet for your tree monitors. And I don't know what the details are about like having to be careful with that. I was wondering if you could explain that, Brandon or Brian, as far as being careful, as far as how you feed so much dubia to your tree monitors. And I want to hear what your guys' take is on that.
Well, I mean, the issue with roaches of any type, from what I understand, is that the roaches apparently breed better on a high protein diet, but male roaches, when they eat a high protein diet, you have to deaminate the protein, right? So you have your nitrogen based backbone to the protein molecule or the amino acids. They have to get rid of that, right, to use it as fuel. So that amino group gets stored as like urate and uric acid and stuff. So that can build up in the roach. And when you feed high protein diet to roaches and you're feeding off adult roaches or whatever, they're oftentimes filled with this uric acid. And then that's because that's stored in their tissues. They can't process that properly, so they just store it in their tissue. And then that gets transferred to the monitors. And I mean, I heard that from knobtail gecko breeders years ago, right? And so I'm assuming, and I don't have any firsthand experience with this, but you know, it will have adverse effects in the adults that are eating those in terms of like potential gout and all this sort of thing, right? Because you're feeding like, you know, a high uric acid content to them. So with the roaches that I feed, I don't feed them any protein at all. I mean, it's strictly vegetation. And roaches to me are a bit annoying because I have to pick through them and it's not as convenient as crickets. So I don't feed roaches too often, but from my understanding, I mean, there may be somebody that knows more about that than me, but that seems
I can't stand the way a dubia feels. Like if one goes on my fucking hand, I flick it off every single time. I'm not an insect guy, but I do know like, okay, I'm trying to save some money here. And I know there's a place where I got to at least have my own colony going.
You can feed roaches very successfully, I think, right? If you had like if I only had a couple monitors, I'd feed them nothing but roaches. But like roaches would be the staple over crickets. but it's what you feed your roaches that's the problem. If you feed them a diet that's high in protein, then your roaches are going to be, you know, storing all that uric acid in their tissues, from what I understand. And then that
I also heard that you don't have to just feed the males either, like the ones with wings.
Oh no. Yeah, you know what? I usually don't feed. I don't feed the adults of any roach, anyways, because I find they're a bit woody and their legs are like, you know, they're pretty. Yeah, so I usually feed like a mid-sized roach, anyways, like some sort of nymph stage or whatever. But
and it's incredible how many people, you know, like they feed their roach colony just dog food. And that's the problem. And that's it, you know, it's not just with your tree monitors. It's like what Brandon said with, you know, it was a big thing with knobtail geckos and all, you know, kind of scared me off a while ago from roaches until I had done some more research. And I know Brandon and I were talking about it for a while, just as like different dietary, you know, items to use. But yeah, I mean, you have to, like you said, you have to go extremely low protein. Like I do feed roaches on occasion, more as like, as I was telling you, when I run out of my other items, it's like my backup.
Yeah.
And I do have some animals that kind of really only they'll go through phases where they only will eat roaches. But again, I'm doing all leafy greens, you know, carrots. And then there's also a rabbit pellet that's very low protein. It's a specific brand by Oxbow. It's called Garden Select, that I'll also offer into my roaches as just like a good staple for them, because when people are breeding roach colonies, it's hard to always provide fresh produce. So they refer to those like, or they usually default to some sort of a pellet. And that's where you get in trouble with a high protein diet for your roaches. So that Oxbow Garden Select is like the lowest protein rabbit pellet that you can get. That's like all really good ingredients in it. It's essentially like different types of like Timothy hay and different veggies that are in that. So that's a really good one that I use for the roaches, but you have to be very careful. Pardon me?
They eat a lot of that. Like you find they eat that.
Yeah, like I can slack. Like for instance, if I'm low on fresh veggies for my insects, like I always will just put a handful of those pellets in, and it's just a nice thing to have. Where like, hey, I don't have fresh veggies today or tomorrow, and so I've got these pellets, and especially something like a roach, it tides them over. But I use it for all of my feeder insects. I'll offer a dry pellet in addition to like, you know, and even last night, like I didn't have any fresh greens. I went out into my yard. I know there's no pesticides out there, and I'm just cutting dandelion greens, and I'm chucking tons of dandelion in with roaches and crickets, and my monitors are getting that. And I think that's like a big thing that people need to keep in mind. We were also talking last night just about like your gut loading is so important with your animals. And I think it's just really bitten a lot of people in the ass with roaches in the past, and they had to learn the hard way. Like their whole colonies of reptiles crashed from issues with feeding roaches the improper diet.
Right. Like I've heard it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I've heard people say the roaches breed better with higher protein, but their males die quickly, right? So, and that's, I can understand why people would do it for that reason. You know, when you get the insects that you intend to feed, I wouldn't be feeding them higher protein stuff to, you know, so that they're transferring that to the monitors, right? And like dog food, like you said, used to be a common thing, and probably lots of people still use dog food, but
they still do.
Yeah, you know, I have a mouse colony, right? So I raise and breed my own mice for the monitors. I
think I just saw one run across your couch.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere in here. but so I do that, but like I get like Missouri rodent chow, right? So it's a high grade rodent food, and it's really good. The mice produce really well on this, but there's been times in the past where, my supplier of it didn't get any. So I've had to go a couple weeks without any rodent food, right? And I've purchased a bag of dog food just to get me through. And man, I'm telling you, you put that dog food in the hoppers for your mouse rack. I only have one mouse rack, right? And those mice within days look like bags of crap. I mean, their fur looks terrible. They're greasy. So I think like dog food is like the lowest quality food you could feed any feeder prey, right? I mean, I have a dog now. We just got one not too long ago, but I feel bad. Like I get this crazy dog food for it because, you know, the old Roy at the grocery store, I'm like, I'm sure that's got to be the worst of the worst, right? So, I mean, I see what it did to my mice, I can't imagine what it did to my pet dog and what it would do to your monitors. In fact, I'm coming to speculate that this is just what I've kind of been seeing, and I'm going to kind of knock quail on this one, but when I was feeding, I went through a period where I was, okay, I'm going to cut down mice because that seems to be the consensus and all this. And I'm going to just feed for like a whole prey item, quail. I noticed a lot more of my females having nesting issues. And I don't know if that was because of a calcium deficiency or what. They just were picky. I'm experimenting with one yellow tree female right now where I've given her no quail since her last cycle. And the whole prey that I've given her have just been like little hopper mice. And that's only once a week. I don't just feed hopper mice, everybody. I mean, I feed mostly insects, but once a week when the whole prey day comes, I'm feeding them just mice. And I want to see, because her last clutch, it was terrible. She didn't nest well at all. I don't know if it was a calcium thing with the quail versus the mice. So I'm playing with that. But like, I think the dietary component for your tree monitors, I mean, it manifests in so many different ways, right? In behavior and even like egg laying and nesting and egg viability and everything. And people don't put enough emphasis on gut loading their bugs and stuff well, or feeding, you know, their rodents well. This is why I don't buy rodents. I don't want to breed mice. I don't breed a lot of mice. I have one rack, but I just don't trust where they're coming from otherwise, right? So yeah. I want to know exactly what goes in. I mean, I got a new cricket supplier a few weeks ago, and in the boxes of crickets they would put chicken mash, egg chicken mash in there for the crickets, plus some carrots. And I had to email the supplier, and I was like, please don't put that in my cricket boxes, right? Some carrots or whatever to keep them hydrated until I get them perfect, but I don't want that chicken mash throwing off the recipe that I have going on here, right?
Right,
so,
right. Huh. That's interesting. So
yeah,
where are you at? How far is this yellow that you're kind of experiencing on? When is she, you know, due to like cycle again and whatnot?
Yeah, she just locked 2 days ago for the first time on the beginning of her next cycle. So wow. We'll see how that goes with her. But yeah, I just know, like, the last cycle I fed her a lot of quail, and when I feed them quail, I don't dust the quail with any additional calcium or anything. I just give it to them. But yeah, I've just in the clutch before that, she had a hard time laying, and so I'm.
When you say hard time laying, are you getting fertile eggs? Yeah,
I'm getting fertile eggs, but it's just like
calcified.
Like, oh yeah, it has nothing to do. It could just be like, if reptiles are depleted in calcium too, they actually have a difficult time like passing eggs and laying eggs. A lot of times egg binding is due to a calcium deficiency. So they've never been bound up. And like I said, this is kind of experimental on my part. I just want to see how this next one goes just with mice, because historically I've always had great luck just with mice. I never fed quail until, you know, started talking to everybody and getting in the community more and whatever. Right? Yeah. So I was like, oh, I got to try this quail bandwagon and see what happens. Right. So, but I can't say that I've observed anything different in terms of like production with quail versus the mice that I've historically fed. But I have noticed some females having a little more difficulty nesting or choosing a nest or taking longer to lay eggs than what seems normal. So I'm just playing with it right now. We'll see. We'll see. It's just a hypothesis.
Where are a lot of your guys' tree monitors laying right now? Are you getting a lot of success of your tree monitors going in the actual nesting and doing where you want them to lay, or is it kind of still sporadic? I know, Brandon, I've talked about females with you that just lay underneath the egg box sometimes and on the side of it. So what's it been like lately for both of you guys?
It's like, well, for me, I have the nest boxes in all their enclosures, but I have set up a system now, and it's like I call it like the safeguard. So I put the nest box on like a 2-inch perimeter of plywood, and then I fill that plywood with like underneath the nest box with peat moss. So it's like a peat moss base. And then I'll cut a hole in the side of the plywood, and they have the nest box that they can go in. And I set the heat pad on top of that peat moss. And it's almost like they really like going under the nest box now that I've done that. And I'm totally fine with that. I'm just like, well, the nest box is a big waste of space in here, but if this is what you want to do, I'm going to let you do it. Right. And then some use the nest box just fine. They don't care. So.
But do you think eventually you could come up with something where it's just the base of that you have that they're laying in? You don't need all the extra box, or do you feel like?
Yeah, well, I think there's something to having something at the base of a large object like the nest box. Like maybe the nest box emulates the base of a tree, and tree monitors will go down to the base of the tree and nest in the root system of the tree, right? So I don't think it would have the same. Honestly, I haven't tried it yet because I don't want to risk it and it seems to be working with these females. I don't want to just do a tiny little nest box at the bottom that they just slink into, because I feel that doesn't give them that security of that big structure above it, right? So what I was thinking of doing was doing that really thin nest box with the heat pad on it, and then maybe just going out to the woods and cutting a stump from a tree and just putting that on it and see if that helps or whatever. And the other thing that like sometimes just to encourage the females to dig in the nest box, I find if I start a hole for them and I dig down to the heat source, my problem with my nest boxes is the heat pads at the bottom. So if they go in there and the soil isn't the right temperature, they don't want to bother digging. You know what I'm saying? They don't know.
They rather just go around and go down.
It would just they sense the heat underneath, so that's why they start looking underneath. So what I do is I will start a hole, and I will dig just with a little diameter hole like that, dig down with my hand, so that if the tree monitor goes in the nest box, they can go in the hole that I started, and they'll sense the heat down there, and then they'll nest in there. Right. So
see, I was always worried. I was always worried by doing that. They're not trying to mess with it because it's already been messed with. Like I was always told, like, you want to prepare that nest box a certain way where it looks like it's been untouched. Because I heard that, just females are very panicky. They're picky, and they're like, oh, fuck this shit. It's like, there's already a hole in here. I don't want nothing to do with this.
The beauty of it being untouched and you making it like perfectly flat. Like I use this, whether it's for geckos or for tree monitors, multiple species, is you're essentially setting yourself up to receive an indicator from what the female's doing. If you're digging that down, it's, to an untrained eye, if it's your first few rounds, or even, I mean, heck, like with me, sometimes I'll have a difficult time telling, like, if I made that or like, wait a second, because I've got tons of different nest boxes going, like, did I start that or did she? So it's good in that respect. But I think it also has to do with like security is a big thing, and also making sure your substrate is the right consistency for it to be a tight burrow. If your substrate's too loose and they're not able to tunnel under it, you're going to have issues with that as well. But
yeah, with that little tunnel that I dig, I don't ever dig it in the middle. I always dig it off to one side, and it's always straight down. And I just reach down in there and make sure I can sense the warmth of the heat pad under the nest box. And they'll go in it, and they'll explore what's in that hole, and then they'll realize, oh, it's warm down there. And then what they'll do is they'll go down the burrow, and then they'll dig a horizontal chamber across the bottom of the nest box, all the way to the other side almost, and they'll lay their eggs on the other side. So the fact that you dug that hole doesn't seem to deter them at all.
Okay.
I think though, if you have a female that's ready to go, at least with mine, in my experience, like she's gonna lay. I'll do what you're mentioning only when like I go in there and the female looks like she laid and I swear she's laid. Sometimes I'm wrong, and I get in there and I'm like, damn, I just destroyed this tunnel. So I'll like smooth it out, and I'll give her a starter so she doesn't have to put forth as much energy into digging all that again. That's when I'll do that. If I know the female's already digging and she's ready, and I have screwed up her tunnel by checking when she did not lay, I'll do that same thing.
See, I almost, once you have a female on a good cycle, they're pretty predictable, right? And I've started really record keeping, like first copulation to the last copulation to when I think they ovulated. It's sometimes not obvious to, so and I've been keeping notes because I want to like publish this at some point, all of these little details about nesting, but I'm pretty dialed in as to when the females are going to lay eggs. So I'll always, instead of like what Bryan does, I'll always preemptively dig that now for them. And it seems like if the female is one of the females that will lay in the nest box and not under the nest box, she's going to use that hole as a base, as the start of the nest. So, and I do that like a week before I expect her to lay, so that she has time to explore it and get in there, and I don't have to be hands-on when she's right in there nesting, right? So yeah.
I mean, it's also the biggest importance about nesting, like if this isn't something you really try to get dialed in, being a new tree monitor keeper, it could be vital. Like this could be something that could end up bad if you don't have your nesting corrected and down right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you don't have the proper nest site, then you're going to get scattered eggs for sure. I mean, that's a
Or
problem.
even retained eggs, like even eggs they don't even want to lay, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, usually I've never had a female that has passed just from like that has died just because she has retained eggs.
Right.
They usually pass them in some fashion. When I've seen eggs that like were held and I'm like, man, this female should have laid, eventually she'll defecate them out. So you'll find like the poop and there's like a completely compacted, almost like what you'd see from like an egg eating snake when they like regurgitate it up. It's like all the contents are emptied and you've got the shell. And you can also keep it like, you can also see a defecation sometimes before they do that, where the defecation looks totally different. You're like, damn, that looks like a lot of egg yolk or something like. So that's kind of what I've seen with a female that hasn't laid. But usually if they're good fertile eggs, like they'll spit them out. And I have taken fertile eggs that were just scattered and incubated them successfully.
Right.
Usually the female's pretty good as far as like if there's bad eggs, she'll kind of kick them out. But you know, it's always worth incubating them. And if they go moldy, you can always pitch them later on.
Right. So don't just toss them right away. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, don't toss them right away if you really know for sure.
Unless they're like if they look like a slug, right? Because there are slugs that they give.
Yeah, and the thing that I've noticed too about tree monitor eggs is if they're going to go bad, they usually go bad pretty quick. And it's bad. It's foul, and you know.
Yeah,
Well, listen,
like with what Bryan was saying there, right? I've never had a tree monitor die because of being egg bound. They are going to expel their eggs, but if they don't nest properly and they scatter them in the enclosure as just to get these out of me now, I can't find the proper spot. Then you have sometimes some fertility issues with those eggs, right? You might lose a couple. And I don't know if that's because they were retained too long, they didn't have enough oxygen supply or whatever it might be, but you know, and they were probably good eggs to begin with. It's just something along that stressful process, you know, nuked those ones in particular. But yeah. So now, and I don't know, Bryan, are your heat pads on the side of your nest box, or I forget what you say?
So I have both. I'm actually, I think I've mentioned this, Nick Major from Animal Plastics. And I mean, I use all animal plastics for my caging, but he came at me a while back with a nest box idea that he wanted me to try out and kind of run past me. And so I took it and incorporated what works well for me. And we made some design changes. Historically, I've done both. I have some that are on the bottom. And I have this new nest box prototype that we've been working on. I have heat on the side that's in like a false wall. And even on this latest version, we kind of took some of that information that you had mentioned too about, you know, when you get a picky nester and kind of bumping it up so there is a plastic rim going around a U shape so you can pack stuff in. So Animal Plastics has got, you know, Nick's been doing some cool stuff with that incubator, and I'm happier with that nest box. I'm happy to have been working with them on it. But right now I've got both. So both have worked. The belly heat works great for me. I mean, it has worked great. The side heat works well too. I mean, if these animals are, you know, they're going to find the heat. They're smart. They're smarter than you think. And they can kind of, you know, they'll figure out where they need to be and where they need to lay. I think the biggest thing is just making sure that your nesting substrate is of the proper consistency, because that's when you're going to run into problems. Whether you have heat on the side or on the bottom, so long, you know, they're going to figure it out most of the time, unless it's a really new female and she's kind of figuring out what to do. But if she's got good eggs, as long as you're within the right zone and your substrate's good, you know, they should lay. But I'm using more of these new prototype boxes, and kind of as the season goes on, it'll be kind of interesting to see, because kind of seeing what works best with those for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So Brandon, we're guests in a lovely couple's house here. So we're only going to do an hour of podcasting right now. But wrap up question, Joel. What was his wife's name?
Joel and Laura.
Two amazing people,
Joel and Laura.
Did he get to meet them when he was visiting?
Did you meet Joel? He's like
wait, Brandon. Wait, time out. Please break down.
I know who Joel is. I don't think I met him when I came down.
Let him break him down. Okay, break him down and tell me what this guy tell him what he did on his birthday today, please.
Oh, so he's insane. He's in his 70s. He's 76 years old, and every birthday that he has, he rides his bicycle that many miles. And he surpassed it today. He rode 80 miles.
Uphill though.
For 5,000 feet elevation gain. He's like the old version of David Goggins, but an old Jewish version of David Goggins.
This dude's a beast.
He's a great dude, and to be honest, he's like the brains. He's like my right hand man for Sundown Reptiles. He single-handedly built every enclosure in my facility, set up all the cork panels, built all the light ballasts, installed all the light ballasts, all the fluorescent fixtures. He did all that, and just the amount of work that guy's put in to build that facility is pretty incredible. And I do want to give a shout out to my other employees. Mike Beaver's been with me for a while, and he's been a great help and an asset. Happy to have him. And we've got a new team member, Reed, who's come on.
Reed, shout out to Reed.
So yeah, I'm very fortunate to have that team, but Joel's a workhorse and an incredible dude. He's still doing triathlons and marathons, and he's,
he has one in 3
76
weeks.
years old.
Oh, it's a big one in 3 weeks.
Yeah. And, dealt with cancer and fought through that in a month after literally having, basically
there's legit no excuses for being a bitch out there. That's
no
all I
excuses.
Say.
Dude ran a marathon.
This guy's a badass. That's
Yeah,
100%.
so, yeah. Thank you to them for letting us use their place tonight for the podcast.
Right.
And,
So I have a wrap up question just to kind of top off this awesome hour and 15-minute podcast. And mainly I get this question a lot. I don't know how to answer this because I'm not in your guys' position, meaning I don't have available tree monitors to sell. But a lot of people ask me, do you think tree monitors will ever become more affordable? Captive born and bred ones. And what is your guys' take on that? Do you ever feel like at some point prices will come down with tree monitors that are captive born and bred in either Canada or United States? Or are they looking to kind of stay where they're at or even maybe increase? What's the prediction at this point?
I think it really depends on what you what your definition of affordable is. There's different species run at different price points. Greens being the most common, having been bred the longest time, are probably the most affordable. I've seen greens available for under $2,000. And then, probably, right now, Bomai are the most expensive. And that's because, literally there's been no captive bred offspring been available, and even wild caught animals going for, over $6,000 an animal or $6,500. And, some of the ones that I've averaged were, I think, around $7,500 per animal average, and that's US dollars. So there's really the more that are produced and the more competition that there is, the more animals available. As that supply goes up, prices could come down a little bit. But I think, when you look at values of other reptiles that have been around for a while, such as basins, chondros, how many more of those animals are being produced than tree monitors? I don't know. Some geckos that are out there that are still going for a pretty big dollar. There's entry points for everything. And again, with how much that these animals cost in electricity, food, and the amount of time and work that it takes to kind of maintain them, I do think overall we can see, some prices coming down at certain points, depending on the species and depending on how many are available, how many are being produced.
What's your take, Bryan?
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's there's the economic supply and demand issue right now. First of all, there's a huge demand, I find, and the supply is very low. And relatively speaking, in the reptile world, in terms of rare animals, tree monitors are really not that expensive compared to what some ball pythons and geckos and other species sell for. Mind you, the cost of keeping them is way more than a lot of those other species too, right? So there's so many variables. But at the end of the day, as more knowledge is gained and more people breed them, there's going to be more competition. And, I was saying to Bryan, it's like, we're known for producing tree monitors. So people, I would imagine, would likely want to get it from a known source rather than somebody who just had their first clutch of tree monitors. So, you know, somebody who just had their clutch of first tree monitors, in order to sell theirs, is going to, you know, probably try and undercut your price. And that's going to, you know, that's slowly going to shimmy it down to some level, I'm sure, at some point. When that point is, I don't know. But it's just like any other good or service that's out there, right? The more supply there is, the cheaper it will become. So I would suspect that prices will come down to some degree, but when that will be, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
To be determined.
Yeah.
But I can tell you one thing, I have an idea. This was fucking one of the best tree monitor podcasts I've ever done. I mean, especially under 2 hours, we got a lot of information out there. So I appreciate both of you guys. I really do. Brandon, you're a real one, man. You're always there to come through whenever I need you. So I got to say thank you so much for all. Not only with me, man, I want to say props to Dylan from Animals at Home podcast. I gave you props on that show. You did an amazing job on that show.
Thank you.
Like you do on all the shows, man. So thank you so much, Brandon. Brandon Van Asten, Canadian Cold Blood only, right? On Instagram, and you're also on Facebook. You're also kind of Facebook.
Yeah.
Or no?
Instagram, Facebook. I do have the antique website still. Don't even bother looking at it. I built that on my Commodore 64.
Well, man, listen, guys, please go give Brandon a follow. Like one of the realest tree monitor breeders in the game, and of course, Bryan Suson. You two, I swear, one of my biggest inspirations are you guys in the tree monitors for me right now. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Bryan, thanks for having me. It's been an awesome time. And shout out to everyone who enjoyed tonight's episode. But give it up for Brandon Van Asten and my boy Bryan Suson. It's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Brandon, thank you so much. Have a good night, and shout out to everyone out there. Please enjoy the rest of your night. Please hit the like button. But that's a wrap for 485 episodes for Trap Talk. Have a good night, and I'm out.